you also need to understand the even bigger picture outside your organization. So what is the tide you're going with, or are there icebergs in front of you? Is there reasons to actually assume you cannot change, no matter how well you execute and how good you try?
Hi, I'm Tracy Lovejoy.
And I'm Shannon Lucas. We are the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to empowering Catalyst to create bold, powerful change in the world.
This is our podcast, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burnout, where we speak with Catalyst executives about ways to successfully lead transformation in large organizations.
And today I am super excited to have time with Jan Sedlacek. Jan is the founder and managing partner of Stryber, a strategic growth consultancy and corporate venture builder in the Middle East, Europe, and Asia Pacific. He recognized the need for a new approach to grow business at scale, which is why he combines approaches from venture capital, startup, and strategy consulting worlds to increase financial and strategic returns for his clients. He's already successfully founded or scaled over 100 businesses with his organization. Before founding Stryber in 2016, Jan gained experience as a startup founder, C-level manager, marketer, web designer, and in strategy consulting. Welcome, Jan.
Thanks very much for having me, Shan. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I just have to tell the audience, I heard Jan speak at one of the Innovators online community forums, and I don't impress easily about people who are talking about change and driving growth in large organizations. And not to put too much pressure on Jan today, but his storytelling, his visual representation, and the actual sort of content of what he brings to the table, I thought everyone needs to hear. So I'm super thrilled. I know you said maybe you're the black sheep of Catalyst, and we love a good provocative conversation. So I would love to hear about you and your catalytic journey, maybe sharing a few career highlights that help us see your catalytic nature, or maybe even your black sheep catalytic nature.
Well, thanks a lot also for your intro. You summed that up better than I could. But to turn it around, actually, the title of your book, I think, is a perfect summary of at least the first part of my career. So moved fast, broke shit, and I definitely burnt out. So I started off actually in technology in the late 90s, first internet bubble. It was an amazing time. Really, really amazing projects for the time, like edge of technology. I was very young. I was somewhat puzzled that a lot of the things didn't really work out, but I didn't understand why or what was like the underlying reasons. I started actually organizational psychology along with business and finance, international management. And that was because I was mostly interested in how why people do what they do. So topics of consumer behavior, behavioral economics, but also and in particular change management. And deeply interested in these processes, I felt well equipped to then start my career. So I went in strategy consulting, which was an amazing time, great learning journey. And again, most of the things that we did when it at least came to growth did not really play out the way we intended it to. So that there seemed to be a big gap between the conceptual world of PowerPoint, like strategy, and then the actual execution on the ground, in particular when it came to growth. I decided that I wanted to do real change, real transformation. And I joined a large travel company in Switzerland back in the day. We're talking mid-2000s now. And that was when traditional travel really became under threat. And the transformation on paper looked very simple. So today you would say a digital transformation. It was very clear that the channels were changing, that consumers were adapting their behavior. And we just wanted to move there. So we incubated all these things. We had dozens and dozens of projects running, and they were of all different sorts of nature. And to cut the story short, 5 years later, I kind of made my career there. So I was ultimately sitting on the board of a division that was European business, about 1 billion in revenue. And I was responsible for marketing. And I was calling my own job that I'm the guy hanging on a rope outside of the Titanic, polishing the tea while the ship was sinking. And this gives you a feeling of how desperate this actually felt. And that was years into my journey trying to apply all the best practices and all the stuff that I've learned in studies and like I took into my journey there, right? And I could very much relate to your description of a catalyst for my younger self back then. That's how I felt. I felt like I'm one of those that actually help breaking through this the structures and trying to change direction. But it all came down to you were on the bridge of this big ship, you were spinning the wheel, like the steering wheel, but the ship just decided to steam ahead and just wanted to ship towards that iceberg and go down. And all you wanted to do is like, go left, you know, it's simply refused. And that's why I was referring to I'm a bit of a black sheep for catalysts, because to be very honest, I don't know how it works. You know, it's kind of, when it comes to a transformation of such a scale where you need to change the whole mechanics of a business model, I think you're demanding a lot of an organization. So you're actually asking every single bit to change. And I don't need to tell you how difficult it is to change even a single bit, let alone all of them at the same time. So this kind of systemic change, I felt a thing of impossible nature. To this day, I'm, how to say, disillusioned, or at least somewhat grounded in that experience of failing to transform when it comes to overly ambitious transformational journeys. And maybe we'll have some time to differentiate a little. I'm not saying that's true for all topics, but when you're really trying to change course fundamentally, people don't want that. It comes down to this simple recognition that I had then, because when you were talking about change, everyone was with you. And they knew they had to, because like at the very top of the organization, there was a CEO who said like, oh, we go left. And then everyone goes, yeah, sure, we go left. But they keeps going straight. So there's natural inclination of which is just human to keep to the patterns that you're familiar with, because that's where you feel safe. And when you actually look into the willingness of people to change, it's surprisingly low. So there is always a big majority of a large group that has no incentive and no inclination towards change. And that is what frustrated me so much. And that's what for me ultimately led to a burnout at that point. So I did burn out. I really relate to the title of your book. It felt a bit like another metaphor I used back then was I felt like in this comical psychiatric ward with the rubber walls. Not sure whether that ever existed, but you know the image, right? Only that the walls were invisible. And you as a change maker, as a catalyst, you knew you have to go there. Like, you know, you have to go straight and the goal is over there, and you put all your energy in, and then just something, some invisible force holds you back. And you have this reset, and you don't even know why. Because along the journey, everyone told you they would be with you along the journey and they would support you and back you up and everything, right? Mm-hmm. And still then you look back and you say, oh, actually I haven't moved. You know? That's where my big frustration with transformational exercises comes from. So that's the first half of my story, so to say.
Yeah, I think it's because I want to pivot into the, like what you did with it. So and certainly catalysts in early stage career definitely experience this more because they don't have all of that experience, all the things that you saw that help us contextualize why it's so hard and all of that stuff. Certainly more mature and accomplished catalysts have learned some of the self-management skills. And I just wanted to respond quickly to say, when we work with catalysts, like in the class, what we teach is we teach them to assess the actual appetite for change of the organization. Because one of the biggest problems is if you have this very disruptive vision and they have a very incremental vision, that just amplifies the burnout and all of the struggle. And so often you'll say to a catalyst, if you guys aren't aligned, maybe you need to go find a place where you are more aligned. But I would love to, because everything that you just said is, like, I guess, probably experienced by our audience. And so where did you land after that? You're like, okay, that's a fool's errand. I don't want to be polishing the tea in the Titanic. So here's how I'm going to help organizations grow.
I'm sure you should have coached me back then, and my younger self would have definitely benefited. And it is, as you said, but the problem was not so much that the top of the organization wasn't willing to change. That the top did mandate the change, but there was more. In hindsight, I'm working more with a sort of a physical metaphor, or it felt like gravity. That's one of the metaphors I use. It really felt like you want to fly, but you weren't equipped to. You don't have a plane, so you try to jump, but ultimately always falling back to the ground, because it's simply how physics works.
Can I ask a question? Did you have other catalysts in your organization that you were working with?
Yes. There was a big change initiative. I was part of a large group, and there was a big commitment, including the storytelling at the top, and towards the shareholders. There was a big amount of investment, a lot of new people, fresh blood, and all of that. But the actual learning from it is very, very frustrating, because what we tried to do was saving a dead horse.
Yeah.
And that was a mission set up to fail. So I don't think actually it was really an execution problem, it was a strategic problem. We were trying to keep a business model alive that simply has expired, that has achieved the end of its life cycle. And that if anything, as a recommendation for other people in this frustration, you also need to understand the even bigger picture outside your organization. So what is the tide you're going with, or are there icebergs in front of you? Is there reasons to actually assume you cannot change, no matter how well you execute and how good you try? Because how it felt then for all these catalysts on the inside was deeply frustrating. So burnouts were an organizational sickness. There were really people dropping out everywhere. It was really extremely straining for everyone that was part of that. For me, this was such a traumatizing experience as well, that I actually decided I would never want to do that again. So I was done with change, done with capitalism. And I decided I want to build things, and I want to grow. So both personally, but also in the themes that I was covering. And I founded my own startup at a very bad point in time, just when we had twins with my wife. And it turned out that was a bit too ambitious to have a startup going on and a young family, and it was all a bit too much. So I stopped that. But then I started to work with existing organizations, because I also had this recognition that there was a lot of good things in my old organization. And one of the startups that I actually did then was a travel technology platform that invented an amazing technology. And I was able to bring in a lot of the vision that we've developed back in my old company, only we've never managed to do that. With the startup, a few capable engineers, seed funding that was pretty remarkable at the time for Switzerland, at least, like 1.7 million. We managed to build a technology platform that my travel company has invested 50 million in and failed. They had to write it off all. and we made it. It felt so easy. You know, if you have a dedicated team that is driven by a vision, that is motivated and capable to execute on it, it was amazing. We actually failed at another point. We gained a lot of traction onto the product, but people didn't trust us with their money because when you book travel, it's pretty expensive. You know, there's a plane ticket involved and hotels and everything. You're easily in a couple of $1,000. Now you have this unknown startup with a real cool interface, but then should you really wire them $5,000? Maybe I go over to booking.com, right? So it was that was our problem. And we failed at that point. And to this day, I'm convinced that we would have made it under the umbrella of the old company. And ever since, I tried to replicate that. So how new that is benefiting from the parenting advantage, from the capabilities, from the assets, and all the good things that are in every large organization. And that has become my theme. So I'm not trying to change people against their will. I'm trying to find something else that a few people from a large organization may be able to do, but not all of them. So then let the rest of them also go about their business. So there is a big case to be made, at least I make it, that you shouldn't divert people from their jobs because those jobs also need to be done. So even on the Titanic, people running the engines, and you need maintaining the ships, right? But you can't start building another ship that goes elsewhere and that has other capabilities. Maybe the metaphor breaks at that point, but I think you get my point. So I'm trying to create an environment where you're actually able to build something with the people that are able to do it. Those are partly on the inside and partly from the outside, and it's very different from one industry to another and one topic to another. But at the essence, it's really about how you organize and how you manage at the very top of such an organization. And that's what we do today. So I'm specialized in growth topics, in finding new growth with organizations that have a legacy, that are established, that do have to deal with all these phenomena. And I'm trying to deal with the phenomena in a sensible way, not trying to change at all cost, but really differentiate about what is the change required. And is it actually a fundamental change or not? Because you can change organizations. I don't argue with that. I'm simply saying you cannot change everything at the same time. But you can change bits, and you can even change parts of a business model, but not you can't overwhelm an organization with too big of a course correction at a given point in time. And the way we go about that is really a lot about you need to know where you're going first. So it's strategy first. And if you don't have that clear vision, and if you don't have a really strong top-level leadership that is going after that vision, and that is mandating at least parts of the organization to go after that, then you shouldn't start. So that's one of the things that I also took away as a learning from my failed transformation. The vision wasn't strong enough and not really believed in by the top management. So the actual beliefs below the surface, not the lip service at the top. So the lip service was, yeah, we go that way, but below the surface, they were deeply convinced that there was nothing fundamentally wrong with their business. So the conviction of really needing to change wasn't there. And if that is the case, then don't try. You have absolutely no chance if you're anywhere below in such a hierarchical pyramid, if the top is actually not really willing to change direction. So that's the first step. Strategy, getting a mandate, getting also the kind of runway in terms of time that you need to execute through such a process. And the second bit that is really one of the main learnings for me is how you organize is as important as how you execute. So it's really to create the environment that allows people to go after these kind of transformational agendas that are not fully in line or not in line at all with the agenda that the existing organization is going after. The way how to do that is very specific. That really is different from one organization to another. It can be through inorganic growth strategies. There is always other companies out there that may actually be a good complementary asset in your business portfolio that you can use as a starting point at least. Oftentimes you need to build things yourself. Then it comes down to finding these entrepreneurial profiles that are able to drive something while they're not real entrepreneurs. So I've seen you work a lot with intrapreneurs, which is an inherently conflicted concept. So you're trying to replicate behaviors and attract people for settings that actually a misfit for. So you need to be extremely careful of how you design the environments and the organizations around them in order not to set them up for a burnout in the first place. And these are the kinds of questions that I'm dealing with these days. We work with large established organizations on these kinds of agendas that move them forward or move into a different direction from where they were going in the past.
I have so many questions, Jan. Okay, let me start with the most important for the audience. I can ask you the personal ones later. Where you landed with point one, we totally agree with. And that's sort of what I was saying earlier, which is if you have this super aspirational as a catalyst in an organization desire for change, and they want incremental, you're done. You should just leave, or just be aware that there's the thing and just, you can stay, but like let go of that and find your catalyst vibe somewhere else, right? And I think the list that you have, making sure that there's a clearly defined strategy and vision, making sure that the top level leadership is like legitimately on board, not just like doing the head nod thing. Beyond that, maybe one of the ways that if they're not is by mandating this. And I think it's awesome that you added runway. I remember at one point in one of my large organizations, I put out like the calendar for 18 months because it was just like even being able to talk with the key stakeholders with our ecosystem was like, there's just a calendaring effect, let alone like all the other things that you have to like navigate. What advice do you have for people really at any level, I guess, but maybe the advice is different for different levels of catalysts within an organization to be able to assess these things?
Well, probably they should reach out to you. I think you're more
Or
competent.
you, it sounds like. I don't know. You don't want to help them. I don't know.
I feel I'm not really competent, because I failed with those questions for myself. But in hindsight, one of the things that I would definitely differentiate is on which level of the organization are you actually operating right now? And unless you're at top level of the organization, what you said before holds true. So look really at how serious is the top with this agenda. And if you feel, and it's probably really a feeling, if you feel that they're not fully serious, then you shouldn't continue, because then you're really set up for a burnout. So for me, this is what happened to me, because the top actually did say we want to go that way, right? So it was not about the proclaimed intention and what they were saying, but it didn't feel they really wanted. So there was this cognitive dissonance between some of the things that were officially part of the agenda and the little acts, how they behaved, and the things that you actually can observe when you're at the inside of an organization. So if you're on a lower level of an organization, be extremely careful what the mandate really is that comes from the top down, and whether that's a real mandate, and also what is the nature of the mandate. Because oftentimes what I see is that they're actually serious about it, but not serious enough to actually take into account or are willing to accept the cost that come with change. And with that, I mean the things you need to break, the revenues that you need to let go, and the behaviors, the processes, the tools, and all the things that you just take for granted and that may not be part of the next step. I think even at the top level, many leaders don't really grasp that or don't really realize that. So that's really this reflection, I think, is essential if you're on a change mission while not being the CEO.
Yeah.
If you're the CEO, different story. Right? Then there's
Totally.
another set of advice. And I really, the way I perceived it back then was that I was not really enabled to do what I was supposed to. And that's when you end up in a burnout. You don't end in a burnout if you work too much. You end in a burnout if the mission you're trying to accomplish and your capabilities and the resources that you're given are not enough or are not equipped to actually achieve what you're supposed to achieve. If that gap is insurmountable, you burn out. You have to
Yeah.
burn out because it's like you're trying to reach for something that is it's simply out of reach. There's nothing you can do about it. If you realize that, then please change the ship. Then go somewhere else. Then I think that's the moment where you should have this self-reflection of you, not only yourself, but in particular the organization around you, whether or not you're on a mission to fail.
Yeah, it's interesting like the different hypotheses that I was testing in my last corporate roles. Like one of them was having the P&L and having enough freedom within running a P&L that's a growth P&L. But to your point, that if I was successful, I was disrupting the core company's S curve at a point of like huge growth opportunity. And so that's one of the questions that I'm like, okay, for Catalyst is like, okay, if I'm successful, I'm probably disrupting your core business or your S curve. And so like, when and how are we going to have that conversation? Another place that I ended up at Cisco because I was super curious about having the corporate venture capabilities to look at different growth opportunities. And I know you talk about, venture studios, like, inorganic growth and organic growth and venture studios. So like, tell us how those things are going. Like what recommendations do you have for people who are in senior positions that are responsible for driving growth for their company and may not be able to do the whole culture change, but you've landed in a different place to solve the growth problem?
What you just described is pretty much the outline of how I think about this thing. So first, don't disrupt your first S curve. So I think it's a very dangerous thing to do. So you're actually playing with fire, risking to break things that are not supposed to break. So from a governance point of view, I would very much argue that you should manage your first horizon, your existing S curve, for efficiency. And you should only try to go for these incremental changes. And as long as you manage your existing legacy organization like that, there is no conflict of interest. People will understand. They will always be able to make the next incremental step towards efficiency, and they'll benefit from it. Right now, the dominant example everywhere is AI. How do most organizations use AI? Well, for simple efficiency. You take it and you do something that you're supposed to do and that is bothering you and boring you out. You do it more efficiently thanks to AI. Great, perfect. Incentives aligned. If efficiency increases, everyone's happy. That's the kind of change that you need to do in your existing legacy. And then you need to be extremely conscious about what else you try to achieve. So if you're actually working on an agenda for another S curve, to use that model, be extremely conscious about what are the mechanics of that other S curve. The one book that really everyone should read who's dealing in transformation and innovation is The Innovator's Dilemma, like really the classic by Clay Christensen.
100%. Yeah.
He was the Newton for corporate management. Like he discovered the fundamental physics of how these processes work. And he also described it in a way that I can very much relate to in hindsight. Even though I've read the book before I joined my corporate mission, it didn't really sink in. I need to first have the scars before I understood what caused them by then actually looking at these things. And he was referring to as to the value system. And the value system contains the economic value system. So how does your organization create economic value, including how are all the people incentivized to create that value? And then you very much recognize that the moment you change the slightest bit, someone will be very unhappy about it. You know, you'll tap into someone's bonuses. You'll remove the profits from an entity that's delivered shareholder returns before, and all these conflicts they are insurmountable. That's basically the reason for the innovator's dilemma. However, if you're aware of that, and if you're aware if your next business model is actually in a different value logic, that's when it comes down to an organizational problem. And that's why I'm so obsessed with questions of governance and organization. Because you can solve for it, but you cannot solve for it by not reflecting this fundamental question. So the way how I go about this is usually that you create a dedicated organization with varying degrees of independence. That can be very dependent. That's possible that the next model is actually very close to what you're already doing, and you need a lot of the existing assets. And you'll think about some teams that are supposed to that, but they're dedicated and have to report to the CEO how they progress in order to back them up, etc. But it can also be pretty removed when you say you're actually building another business. Like one of the classic examples is AWS from Amazon. In the first place, they built it from themselves, and it was a very value-creating thing for them. And then they just realized other people may use that as well. And then they carved it out into an independent organizational unit with Amazon as their first customer, etc., etc. You know the story as well as I do. But that could not work without an organizational intervention or a structural intervention where you deliberately say, these people now are supposed to do AWS. They're not supposed to sell books anymore. You know, it's a different mission. They're going into a different direction. There are still synergies with the old, but they're tasked to do something else. So the organizational structure, the strategy, and the way how you interact with those people are absolutely crucial for your chances to succeed.
I'm like, I want everyone to work with you because I think you're so spot on. And another epiphany that I had as you were talking, I mean, you handed me the epiphany. It's not a big thing, but you're talking about like, what do you want to do? Like getting down to the essentials of like, what is the mission here? And what I realized is like, are you actually in a true growth moment? Are you actually looking for growth, or are you looking for survival right now? And I think that those are two different things, because the efficiency thing is often just a survival. Like we have to get back to our fundamentals. We need to make sure that those are working well. And actually we saw that a lot in the last like 18 months, maybe more, where it's the whole do more with less. Like that, I don't know if that's like strong in Europe, but that's been a really big theme for business recently. And obviously AI starts to unlock that. So I mean, it's just a takeaway for me of like, yeah, the focus on, are you in survival or growth mode? Because certainly growth mode has its own challenges that are different, I think, than being a catalyst and help drive efficiencies in the organization. I want to go back to one of the things that you said earlier. This is sort of a personal question for me, but I think the audience will be interested too, because you're like, after the burnout and the trauma and all of the things, you're like, I went on this path of personal discovery and personal growth, personal and professional growth. And I heard you say, you're like, I'm not that burnout guy anymore. So I'm wondering if you can share some of the personal lessons you learned as a catalyst as you started to create your path outside of these organizations.
Well, for me, I'm not even sure whether that's a lesson that I can pass on, because it was like an experience I had to do. I don't think I would be at the same point in my life and in my career without having had that rupture. It kind of it provided me with that pause, that break, like an accident, after which you find yourself in the hospital, and just thinking about what the hell was going on. How did I end up here? So this capability of reflecting where you are and whether you're on a journey that you actually want to continue, I think sometimes it takes quite a lot of pain to have that reflection. And it's not something that comes easily because it will imply change for you personally. After that, let's call it accident,
Yeah.
it was easy because I didn't have a chance. Like that, I did not. I really literally went through. Would I want to work for this organization? No, no. Went through all the organizations that I could work for, none of which I could imagine. It was for me like a physical sensation that I
Mhm.
could not work in such a setting ever anymore. So the only path for me left was actually to create my own business. And of course, then you try to also reflect on what is it that you've learned and how can you put that to the benefit of both your personal life and the business that you're managing or working for or creating, which for me led to the company that I built up since. So I tried to take these lessons and take the conclusions into a value proposition for others. So to avoid at least some of the pain that I went through. That's our proposition as a business. But you asked for my learnings as a on a personal level, and to be honest, I think the one thing that really is needed is this. I'm not sure what the word is in English, but this breaking point where you really say, "Am I fundamentally on the right track here?" And I think people feel that. So they have a feeling that something's off. And this what I called the cognitive dissonance before. That's something you perceive it. When you have these feelings, I think my recommendation would be to listen to these perceptions and trying to understand what is behind them and also what it does with you. Because if you are actually that catalyst, please go on a mission that you can succeed with. So that is my most fundamental recommendation or my most fundamental um, insight because it's 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 such incredible pain that you can avoid by simply leaving the ship before it hits the iceberg. You know.
Yeah, I do know. And I think thank you for sharing so genuinely and so deeply. It's really lovely. And I think a lot of our audience will relate. I certainly relate to, like, it got so bad, I was broken. I mean, it was like, existentially challenging. I think though, there's sort of two thoughts. One is one of the enterprise jobs that I took, I had a lot of opportunities at the time, and a mentor of mine had me put them on butcher block all over the on the wall. And one of them I put the skull and crossbones under. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that one. But I did choose it with a lot of intentionality. And there's something in what you're saying here is like, you're like, listen to the perceptions, listen to your intuition. I think it's like for catalysts, you can make the choice to go do something that you have a 10% likelihood of being successful at, with an intention of what are the lessons that I'm going to learn along the way. I have these hypotheses and what am I going to learn? But I think with the construct, if we can't stay grounded in what our original intention was, and we start believing like we actually should be successful at all costs, that's when some of that dissonance, like you forget that you're in the experiment instead of like on the hook for the delivery. But I love the message writ large of, to people who are listening, go on a mission where you can be successful. Like, we have this vision of having the top 100 catalyst friendly places to work, which is not to say you want more than 5 to 10% of the employee base to be catalyst. That would be a disaster. But I think the organizations that know how to tap into and leverage the people and help them be set up for success in the things that they're being tapped to do are just going to have a huge competitive advantage over their competitors or the marketplace. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, thanks to you, and I think really you're hitting it spot on there. So there's nothing wrong with trying as long as you're conscious about what you're trying. And also, if you're having a certain awareness around these environmental factors, then failure is much less of an issue. Then you say, okay, maybe actually my feelings, my perceptions are right. Then you fail and you say, okay, I confirm my hypothesis and move on. If you're not aware, you perceive it as a personal failure,
That's right.
which is what happened to me. So I felt I failed personally. And I actually wrote a case study with INSEAD, the business school, basically as a simple process of psychological coping for myself. And I only through that recollection, I realized that we were actually on a mission to fail. I didn't have that awareness before. So I think awareness is really a key thing here, that you're trying to be aware as best as you can for what is the mission actually that you are on.
Do you have any tips for listeners about how to continue to reconnect with that awareness? Because as catalysts, it is easy to get sucked into the actual, I think I can solve the problem booth.
I think that's very different for every individual. I think even the times have improved, like a lot of these trends of sorts or these movements, like consciousness, also techniques like meditation, yoga, none of which I'm actually capable of doing, but I think those things really help. So you're able to learn how to retract a bit from the day-to-day reality and make this sort of mental abstraction. So if you find a way, and I think everyone should find a way to do that, and it's different things for different people. For me, I'm a pretty nerdy and rational guy, so I have my own set of techniques. So, for instance, I have a little piece of a meteor just in front of my
Cool.
desk in my office, and it's just I simply take the thing in my hand and like that thing is 5 billion years old. It fell onto this planet 5,000 years ago. Now here's a big picture. So it just it serves as a it serves as a reminder to trying to take a step back and to look at the bigger picture and how things connect. For me, that's one of my coping mechanisms. But I think everyone needs to find their own way of doing that reflection and of creating that awareness of their situation.
Freaking brilliant. I love it. All right. I've totally talked to you too long, but I'm going to ask, who's the most inspirational catalyst, past or present, and why would you pick them?
Now, that's a difficult question to answer. And first is because I don't have that one person, because I think different times, different situations require different catalysts. And if you take one of these halo figures and say, that's my inspiration, you risk to get into this apply one size fits all transfer. So that's why I'm a bit skeptical. Like, you want to be the next Steve Jobs or like, that won't work for pretty much every situation. You know?
Yeah, totally.
But so when it comes to real transformations, actually one of the deeply frustrating things that I've investigated with my company is that most companies actually fail. So if you're looking at the success rates of fundamental transformations with regards to new business creation, at least 70% of companies fail. And the few that do master it have usually a very particular set of circumstances and people that were able to deal with it. But very long introduction to an answer. So I would try to look at circumstances that resemble your own. And then you can find inspiration for people that were able to deal with such a situation. So just for instance, there's this big transformational case of IBM that is often used as an example how a big company can change, like elephants can dance, etc. Right? What Lou Gerstner did back in the 1990s there was exceptional. So it's really worth reading that story, because then you also understand what the environment was at the time and how big the pressure was for IBM to change. There was a lot of pain. They were with their backs to the wall. It was not that they were coming out of a situation of comfort. And his very mandate was to actually achieve that transformation. And the way he went about it was brilliant. So yes, read that story, but then don't try to be Lou Gerstner. So you need to kind of find then your own sets of inspiration, and also combine them maybe in a persona that doesn't exist. And you say, yeah, I'll need to take a little bit of Lou Gerstner, but a little bit of Steve Jobs would be nice as well.
Amazing. I love that. I love the relativism and contextualization of all of your answers, which is why I think you're so smart and spot on with everything. Is like it matters, that context matters. Jan, it has been an amazing privilege to have this conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was my great pleasure.
And to our listening audience, thanks so much for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about how to create bold, powerful change in the world, be sure to check out the book that he referenced, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burnout, or go to our website at catalystconstellations.com. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, please take 10 seconds to rate it on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And of course, if you have a catalyst in your life, hit the share button and send a link their way. Thanks again.